I'm Carrie Dolan from Forbes. I'm very excited to be moderating this session discussing, as you just heard, transferring responsibility or how to raise a grounded child. I think this is an issue that probably affects most people in this room, or will be affecting you at some point. And we have a fantastic panel to discuss it. Warren Buffett, who needs no introduction, I think, in this room, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway and the Oracle of Omaha. And next to me, closest, is Peter Buffett, his son, a musician and producer. And next to Warren, in the purple, Marilyn Carlson Nelson, who is just recently retired as chairman of Carlson, a family-owned hotel and travel company. And to her right, Liesl Pritzker, who is an impact investor, full-time impact investor. So I also just wanted one note, we are going to open up to questions about halfway through, so please get your questions ready. I'm sure that some of you may want some advice from this group here. Warren, let's start with you. At the heart of this issue is how do the very affluent raise children to share values? So maybe you can talk about how you did this in your family, because you've successfully raised 3 children that are very active in philanthropy.
Yeah, our kids had a very normal growing up. I mean, I've only lived in one primary house that I've owned in my life, and bought that in 1958. So they did not see us moving into progressively fancier houses. They did not ride in private planes. They went to school on the bus. They went to public schools. Every member of the Buffett family in Omaha has gone to a public school. They went to the same school that their mother had gone to. They went to the same high school that she'd gone to. So we were living in an area where, in today's dollars, probably our neighbors were making maybe $75,000 a year or something of the sort. So they never really thought they were living in that we were economically different than the neighborhood.
As your wealth grew, did you actively try not to change your lifestyle?
No, I lived the life I wanted to live, and my wife lived the life she wanted to live, and that's the way we wanted to live, and our kids grew up that way, and it's the way we grew up. Both my wife and I lived a similar life when we were growing up, and there wasn't anything that we wanted we didn't have, but we didn't crave a lot of possessions or anything like that, and we were enjoying our life, and the kids were enjoying. I mean, our house was the center sort of activity for particularly my daughter's friends. I mean, they still get together now, the same ones as then, and the neighbors didn't think of us as doing anything special. They kind of wondered what I did, because for 6 years I didn't even have an office. Yeah, money was not a factor in the life we were living, nor with the people that lived around us or anything of the sort. I mean, it was something I did on the side, sort of, and I went off every day after a while. For 6 years, I worked at home out of a room off my bedroom, and no secretary, no bookkeeper, no nothing. And so there was no reason for our kids to develop any unusual feelings about money or anything of the sort.
So I'm curious, Peter, when you started maybe seeing that your father was on the Forbes list of the richest Americans, how did you square that with the man you lived with, who was your father, and how he raised you?
Well, and that would, by the way, be about the time that we found out how much money we had as a family. I mean, and I'm not kidding. I mean, it was when I was in my 20s that, my mom and I talked at some point, because there he was on this list, and we laughed about it, because we said, well, isn't it funny? We know who we are, but everybody's treating us differently now, And so it was a fascinating switch, although not a huge one, because we didn't live in that world or a cultural framework where there was a lot of wealth being shown, and so our friends, they were as surprised as I was.
The kids were formed by the time.
Yeah, we were.
And they knew who their friends were, and their friends were their friends because they liked them, and not because they were the rich kid on the block or anything of the sort.
So Marilyn, you have a slightly different situation. So you're the second generation in the family business, right? So your dad was building it up as you were growing up. And then, you, by the time that you were running Carlson, you probably had to deal with, how do I raise kids in a family that's fairly affluent? Why don't you talk about like the differences in your growing up versus how you raised your children?
Well, first of all, unlike the oracle sitting next to me, who went into a room upstairs and wove straw into gold, my dad was an entrepreneur who had this vision to build a company, and every time we went out to dinner, he had a very humble beginning himself. He was from a Swedish immigrant family. And we'd go out to dinner, and if dessert wasn't included on the menu, he'd ask us, my sister and me, only 2 children, if we wanted to order dessert. And if we said yes, he'd scowl at us and give us a lecture in compound interest. And we got it over and over again. We had to do the same thing about voting, whether we would invest in the company or take a summer vacation. And we got 3 votes, my mother, my sister, and I, and he had 4. So we did sometimes get to take a vacation. But all of this, even as time went on, and the 3 families, my sister's family, mine, and my dad's, all lived next door to each other, that same conservatism showed up when he would drive past my home and call me and say, "Are you giving a party?" I'd say, "No, why?" And he'd say, "So many lights on." So I think, oh my goodness. So this sense of respect for capital was clearly something that we grew up with. And my children grew up with obviously a grandfather who was entrepreneurial, had a passion for the business. He made it the most exciting thing on earth every Sunday after church to go stop at one of our properties, and he'd ask the kids questions. What did they notice? How, was it clean? Were the people nice? Were they friendly? And what a joy it is to be in the service business. So that sense of a purpose, that the family had this purpose. And when we talked about philanthropy, of course, we were Methodists, so we had this do all the good you can for all the people you can and all the places you can philosophy. But he also talked a lot about the best philanthropy being a job. And so every time we'd open a new hotel or a new property, it was important to him to share how many jobs we created. And he was very verbal. So we had a kind of oral history, and he left a credo: whatever you do, do with integrity. Wherever you go, go as a leader, have the courage to lead. Whenever you serve, serve with caring. Whenever you dream, dream with your all and innovate and never give up. And our children know that by heart. Our children have taught it to their scout troops. They've talked about it, what it means. And to this day, in our company, we have one day a year, whether in a hotel or in a restaurant around the world, we have Values Day. And people, whatever level they are in the company, take at least 1 hour, in some cases 3 hours, depending on their supervisory level, et cetera, to discuss how values should impact the way they do their particular job and the way they live their life. And I get love letters from people who say that the fact that we would care, and that we would care about how they impact and how they feel about their job. So this culture has been shared between the company and our family foundation. And I do think, listening to all of you and the extraordinary things that you're doing, I'm so impressed that you're applying your business principles to your philanthropy. And I'm sensing that your philanthropic exposure is making you a better leader and a better global corporate citizen as well. And that's what we're trying to do. We have only 7 in our next generation, so we have more than enough jobs to go around. My daughter's the new chairman. As much energy as I have, I feel like it's important to put succession in place and demonstrate trust. And we have our family members serve both on the board of our company, along with several very sophisticated independent directors, and on the board of our foundation. They are the board of our foundation, and we've been very careful, my sister and I, who actually own the voting shares of the company, not to impose our philanthropic ideas on that group. We share them, but it's very much of a democratic activity, because our sense is that the money hopefully will make a difference. I heard this morning that charity is one way, and I understand that. We've put in metrics, but the most important thing that we've done, I believe, is that our family makes site visits. And we make site visits, we get on a bus and we make site visits together. And so I have the sense that between the exposure to the company, they're watching what it means to us when we open a hotel in Liberia, when we open some of the new hotels that we've opened in Africa. Their sense of what we're doing to contribute gives them a sense of purpose, both in their corporate life and in their philanthropic life. And maybe we're just lucky, but we just have a wonderful family.
That's great. Liesl, you grew up in the Pritzker family, the extended clan that owns the Hyatt hotel chain and lots of industrial companies, including Marmon, which Berkshire Hathaway now owns. Talk a little bit. I mean, and you gained notoriety. I think it's fair to say, when you were a teenager, because you chose to sue your father and relatives because you wanted to figure out what was going on in the trust. So, I mean, one thing is that, you know, we can learn from this is families don't always, nothing is always cherry pie with families. So, but this led to, I think, some of what you're doing now. So talk about that lawsuit and how you've taken your inheritance and used it, and what family values led you to do what you're doing.
Well, I personally think the lawsuit is much, much less interesting than the things we're doing now, so I'm going to punt that one. But one thing growing up and being an inheritor of wealth, and one thing that I knew, and growing up in Chicago, where my family is from, is I knew I came from a very philanthropic family. I remember in third grade going to the Pritzker gallery at the Art Institute. I mean, you just know, sort of growing up, that you come from a family that takes their civic responsibility very seriously. And I've seen that pass on through the generations. My cousin Allison is over there, and she works with Professor Eunice. And so one thing that I always knew, being an inheritor of wealth, is, okay, well, what's my responsibility to steward this wealth properly? What can I do to help make the world a better place? And because I had the ability to start doing that at a young age, I treated it like a job. So I started volunteering, I started interning at microfinance institutions, I started traveling. Then, after meeting and talking with a lot of peers and a lot of very smart philanthropists, decided to take a portion of my assets and set up a foundation. But I don't think at 24 I had the ability to run that foundation, so I put my mother as the president, and I was the vice president. And so we've continued working with that foundation. We do a lot of international education initiatives and partner a lot with the UN, which has been terrific. But I think that what I've really gained in starting my philanthropy at a very young age is, I don't think that just because I inherited money that makes me a good philanthropist, or that that's a business necessarily that I should go into. I think just because you make a lot of money, that doesn't necessarily make you a good philanthropist. It's a skill. It's something that you have to learn, and learn from other people, and learn by doing. And so I'm glad, just in the years that I've been doing what I've been doing, seeing the intricacies, seeing programs start and stop, seeing how good public-private partnerships can be created, seeing the power of the private sector in leveraging whatever you're doing philanthropically. I think the benefit of starting that young and being able to learn instead of sort of waiting until I was much older has benefited the work that we've been doing. And so regardless of how the wealth was inherited, I'm grateful that I've been able to use it the way that I have from a young age. And a lot of that is due to learning from my family. They're incredible philanthropists. And so that's what I've chosen to do.
That's great. Warren, talk about when you made the decision to give away most of your money and how you decided how you wanted your kids, why you decided your kids should be running foundations.
Yeah, I made the decision, actually, or my wife and I made the decision when we were in our 20s that once we had, we'd have everything we wanted or needed, but that I kept telling her that there'd be a lot of money, and she kind of laughed. But the idea always was to give it away, and we formed the foundation, the family foundation, back in the 1960s. We also jointly came to the conclusion that although we might have one big family foundation, that it was important that each of the three children have a separate one. So that I've seen some foundations that are family created where lots of problems have occurred because there's 3 or 4 or 5 children on the foundation board, and some of them feel that their interest gets slighted and so on, and those things tend to grow, and then they start remembering that one of them twisted the tail of the cat back when he was 6 years old, and it goes, it can accelerate. So I guess probably 25 years ago we set a relatively small sum aside that each one would give, but then in the late 90s, I think it was, one year at Christmas, I just formed three dummy corporations, and then at Christmas presented these three corporations to each of the three children, and I think we started them with $10 million each. But we told them there would be more. We would not judge them one against the other. That in philanthropy, who knows what activities will pay off when or anything of the sort. So we were going to add to it as we went along, but we would add equally. I was not on the board of those foundations. My wife was not on the board of the foundations. They were entirely left up to them. And then we increased those several times, and then last year on my birthday, I doubled the amount that go to each of the foundations. The letters explaining what I expect the kids to do are on BerkshireHathaway.com, and I told them I expected them to fail on some things. If they didn't fail, they weren't doing important things, and that I was proud of all three of them, and I knew I'd be proud, of what they did with this money, and that the money would be increased over time, and it's a pretty simple approach.
So Peter, what was it like for you then? I mean, do you feel like had you had conversations with your father that you knew, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this foundation, I'm going to have to start it, and I mean, also, if you haven't read Peter's book, I've been reading his book, Life is What You Make It. I highly recommend it because a lot of what we're talking about today, he deals with in his book. So I'm just putting it.
And read whatever Carrie's written.
but anyway, so let us hear
No,
about
we
that.
had no. I mean, my sister called Jennifer and I in March of 2006 and said, "Are you near a fax machine?" And so I got near a fax machine, and a fax came through that was essentially saying that my dad was going to do this. And so, no, we had no prior conversations. Now, it's true we had a very small foundation and then a larger one starting in '99. And so we experienced that. It went from 10 million to about 120 million, I think, over the course of 6 years or so. And so we certainly learned a lot. I consider that sort of he was priming the pump, sort of, whether they knew it or not, for this big gift, of what we call the Big Bang in 2006. And but there was no real discussion about that. And so, yeah, we had to get our house in order pretty quick.
And how was that? I mean, in terms of figuring out, okay, well, these are the things that we're interested in funding, and
Right.
I mean, did that take a while?
That took time. I
Yeah.
mean, Jennifer and I do it together, which is great because I had a career. I mean, that's the other thing is I had my life. I had a life I loved. I had things I would do every day. And so to suddenly take this on at that scale alone would have been an extraordinary, I certainly won't use the word hardship, but it would have strained where I wanted to put my attention. So the fact that my wife, Jennifer, was on board with me and we did it together was a huge thing for me. And then we took 2 years really we were certainly supporting things, and actually working in Liberia was one of the first things we did. But we took 2 years really listening. I mean, we were here in New York, and it was like a master class because we could talk to anybody we wanted to. It's funny, you know, you have $1 billion foundation, and your jokes are funnier, and you're better looking, and it's magical.
And people will take meetings with you.
People take meetings.
Right,
Yeah. So, but we really respected people's time and energy, but took the meetings because we learned a ton, and that was, you know, priceless, really.
And have you been failing as your dad would like you to do? I mean, in terms of taking risks with your philanthropy that may lead to failure, right?
Absolutely.
Because you don't know if they're going to work or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like if you're not on the edge, you're taking up too much room. I mean, you should definitely be pushing, you know, ideas so yeah, we're out there trying to do things all the time that I feel that not only do I hope some of them fail, but I also know they're going to take a lot of time. I know it's going to be 10 years, 20 years. Generational change we'll never see, you know, so that's the other thing. The time horizon is a big issue for us in a good way.